The rain had been falling for days, not the gentle kind that kissed the earth, but an angry, relentless torrent that clawed at the roofs, filled the rivers, and swallowed the roads. In the small rural town of Waverly, the sky had turned a permanent shade of charcoal, and people spoke only in hushed tones about evacuations and rising water levels. Matthew Carter stood on his porch, soaked to the bone, staring at the horizon where the valley lay hidden beneath a blanket of storm. He had returned to this house after his father Dedan, old two-story farmhouse that hadn't seen renovation since the late 70s. He hadn't expected to stay more than a few weeks. That was 6 months ago. Life had a way of gripping you by the heart and dragging you into the past. Now, the storm was threatening to undo what little peace he'd found. The emergency alert had gone off on his phone an hour ago. Flash flood warning, seek higher ground immediately. He should have left. Everyone had. But something in him couldn't abandon the house. Or maybe it was the guilt that made him stay. He wasn't sure anymore. Thunder cracked across the sky like the snapping of a tree trunk. Matthew turned back inside and shut the door, the wood groaning against the wind. He was gathering what few belongings he needed when he heard it. A sound so faint that at first he thought it was the wind whistling through the floorboards. Then it came again, a high-pitched yelp, short, desperate, muffled by distance and rain. Matthew froze, his breath caught in his chest. It wasn't just a sound, it was a cry, an animal, a dog. Against all logic, he stepped back onto the porch, shielding his eyes as the rain lashed against his face. He listened. The yelp came again, louder this time, closer. Down near the edge of the woods by the creek, or what used to be a creek. Now it was a swollen, raging river. Without thinking, he grabbed his coat, flashlight, and a rope from the garage. The mud was ankle-deep, and every step pulled at his boots like hands trying to drag him down. He followed the sound, guided more by instinct than sight. Then he saw it. Huddled against the trunk of a half-submerged tree was a dog, medium-sized, short-haired, shivering violently. Its fur, or what could be seen of it, was matted with mud and leaves. One of its legs was clearly broken, but its eyes, they were wide, terrified, locked on Matthew. "Hey, easy now," he called out softly, voice trembling as much from the cold as the adrenaline. "I'm here, I see you." The water was rising, fast. The bank had already eroded nearly to where the dog was perched. A minute longer and it would be swept away. Matthew didn't wait. He tied one end of the rope around a fence post and the other around his waist and plunged into the water. It was like wading into liquid ice. The current fought him with every step, but he pressed forward. "Hold on," he whispered. "Please, just hold on." He reached the dog just as the tree branch it had clung to began to shift. With one arm, he grabbed the animal, cradling it against his chest, the other hand gripping the rope. The current roared louder, threatening to pull them both under. But step by agonizing step, he dragged himself and the dog back toward land. He fell to his knees in the mud when they reached solid ground, gasping for breath. The dog whined softly, nuzzling its snout into his jacket. Matthew wrapped his coat around, heart pounding. "You're safe now," he whispered. "I've got you." Matthew staggered back toward the house, slipping in the mud as the rain continued to hammer down. The sky rumbled above, a warning that the worst might not yet be over. Inside, he laid the dog on an old wool blanket near the fireplace and threw logs into the hearth, striking a match with shaking hands. The fire took, coughing out orange flames, and slowly began to push the chill from the air. He grabbed towels and started drying the trembling animal, speaking in a low voice all the while. "You're lucky I heard you, buddy," he murmured. Real lucky. The dog's eyes never left his. Deep brown, wide with pain, but laced with trust. It didn't growl. It didn't bite. It simply watched him, breathing fast but steady. He found an old first aid kit in the cabinet and gently cleaned the wound on its leg. It whimpered but didn't pull away. The break looked clean, but serious. He wasn't a vet, but he did what he could, wrapped it, stabilized it. The dog lay still, exhausted. As the hours passed, the storm only worsened. Lightning lit the room in stark flashes. Water began to pool in the corners of the house. Matthew moved the dog upstairs to the small bedroom he used as his own. He placed it on his bed, then sat beside it, wiping away water from its face. "Let's get you a name," he said softly. "Can't keep calling you Dog, can I?" The dog tilted its head slightly, a flicker of curiosity. It gave Matthew a strange warmth, like a light had been sparked in the darkness that had lived inside him for so long. "Scout," he said after a pause. "You look like a scout, brave enough to survive all that out there." Scout blinked slowly, as if approving the name. Matthew lay down on the floor beside the bed, listening to the storm outside, the quiet breathing of the creature he had saved, and the racing beat of his own heart. He didn't sleep. Not that night. Not after what he had seen. Not with the floodwaters still rising. The morning came in silence. No birds, no wind, just a dull gray light leaking through the curtains. Matthew stepped outside to a world transformed. The fields were gone, buried beneath brown water that shimmered under the weak sun. The road out was impassable. The house, miraculously, had stood firm but only barely. Inside, Scout had not moved much, but his eyes were brighter now, and his head lifted when Matthew entered the room. He offered the dog a small bowl of water, then some leftover roast chicken. Scout ate slowly, carefully, but finished every bite. Over the next 3 days, they were alone. No power, no phone service, just the two of them. Matthew would talk and Scout would listen, as if every word meant something. He spoke about his father, about the loss, about how the farm had never felt like home until he returned, how he had spent years in the city trying to be someone he wasn't, trying to forget things that couldn't be forgotten. Scout gave him something no person ever had: excellent, unflinching presence. By the 4th day, a rescue boat arrived. The man in the orange vest looked surprised to see them. "You okay out here?" he asked. "We didn't think anyone stayed behind." "I couldn't leave," Matthew said. He glanced at Scout. And neither could he. They offered to take him to a shelter, to take Scout to a vet, but Matthew shook his head. "We'll get there ourselves. We've made it this far." Scout healed slowly. Matthew took him to a vet 2 towns over, where they confirmed the break had started to mend. The vet was surprised by how calm Scout was, how trusting. They estimated he was about 3 years old, no chip, no collar, a stray. Or maybe he had been abandoned. That idea made something twist in Matthew's chest. He built a small ramp for Scout to use until his leg grew stronger. He started reading books again, cooking full meals, opening windows, laughing at little things. They would go for short ones at first, down the muddy trail that led to the edge of the woods. Scout always stayed close, like he remembered the water, the fear, the near-death moment. One night, Matthew woke to find Scout curled against him on the bed, paw resting gently on his arm. It was the first time he hadn't woken from a nightmare in weeks. As the town rebuilt, neighbors returned. People spoke of losses, livestock, houses, even lives. Yet amid all the sorrow, there were stories of resilience, stories like Matthew's. He didn't speak much about what happened that night, but people knew. They saw him and Scout walking side by side, heard the way he spoke to the dog like an old friend, and saw the change in his eyes, something softer, something alive. One afternoon, a young man came by with a camera. Said he was writing an article for a local paper, Matthew explained to Scout after. "Wanted to know how I found you." Scout wagged his tail, ears perked, as if amused by the idea of being famous. But the truth was, Matthew hadn't found Scout. Scout had found him, saved him from himself, from the hollow grief, from the quiet that had become unbearable. Years passed. The storm became a memory retold on anniversaries. The flood line still marked the base of the farmhouse wall, but now it stood strong, freshly painted, filled with warmth. Scout's muzzle grew gray, his eyes slower, but every morning he waited at the door, ready for their walk, and every night he lay by Matthew's side, the same way he had the night he was rescued. When Scout's time came, it was gentle, peaceful. Just like everything he had brought into Matthew's life, Matthew buried him beneath the oak tree at the edge of the woods, where the flood had first threatened to steal him away, where the fight for life had begun. He carved a simple plaque, Scout, the one who listened, the one who stayed, the one who saved me. And then, for the first time in years, Matthew stepped off the porch, not with grief, but with purpose. Because now, when he walked the trails alone, he still felt the echo of footsteps beside him,